Hi, this is Nick Freitas with Making the Argument, and this is our relaunch episode. So, once again, for all of you who were tuning into our podcast during 2020, I want to thank you for rejoining us in 2021. Sorry we took a little bit of a sabbatical there, but we want to kick it right off with talking about what happened during the elections in 2020. The storming of the Capitol on January 6th, the inauguration. We want to kind of hammer out all of these different things and talk about, what happened, why it happened, and what is a conservative response to a lot of this. And one of the things that's really important to me here is, and this has been since the beginning of Making the Argument, it's not just about presenting, my viewpoint of something. It's about actually going through and using the laws of logic, using history to make a rational argument, to come to a logical conclusion about events as they took place, and to, again, provide some clarity, but also to provide that overall argument for what did we see. Because ultimately, the job of making the argument is not to tell anybody just what they want to hear. It's about making an argument that relies on facts, evidence, in the hope to arrive at truth. Jump into what happened during the election cycle in 2020. Because obviously there were problems. Now, you can make arguments all day long on were the problems overblown? Was there as much voter fraud as some people claim there was? Was there no voter fraud? Again, like so many things, it's about carefully looking at the facts and evidence that you have. If people don't have faith in the way that the elections are being conducted, that's actually another form of voter suppression. If you're creating a voting environment where it is so easy to commit voter fraud, or it's so easy to be able to cast illegal ballots, then you drive down people's confidence in the overall electoral process. If you are a conservative and you are exclusively waiting around for the right politicians to solve this, I am telling you, we've already lost. If that's become our philosophy, that the right people in office will solve all this, we have already lost. And I would argue that what it really is it's giving into the narrative. It's giving into actually a left-wing view of philosophy, because predominantly on the left, they do see government as the primary way to solve problems. They do see government as the primary way to fix issues within the marketplace, or within education, or within society in general, or with how individuals behave. Right? But as conservatives, we've kind of rejected that narrative. Philosophically, the foundation of our philosophy is based on the idea that no, government has a certain role to play, and that role is primarily to protect your God-given rights, to protect your property rights, to allow you to live in relative safety so that you can engage in exchange, and that you can be the author of your own story. You can decide what your life's going to look like. But it's not there to pick winners and losers. It's not there so that every time you fail, the government rushes in and props you back up at the expense of somebody else. It's not there to control how your children think or what your health care looks like. That's not its role. But if we've essentially said now that, well, anytime we see a problem or anytime we see a challenge in society, then it's not a question of whether or not the government will be involved. It's a question of who controls the government apparatus. I'm going to be honest with you, that's not a conservative philosophy I support or have ever supported. And we as conservatives, when something happens that we don't like, if we're the ones now arguing to remove those constitutional boundaries because we don't think government is working quickly or effectively or efficiently enough, well, then we've already given in to the leftist argument. We've already given in to the fundamental premise of their argument. And now this is just a question of who's going to wield, supreme government power to interfere in each other's lives. And for anybody that's thinking that I've gone soft or I'm not fighting hard enough, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to be very, very open and a little bit raw with you right now. If your impression is that me or my family hasn't fought hard enough for what we believe in this country, I invite you to look at the effort that we put into to trying to fight for our beliefs, and then look at your own efforts, and then tell me whether or not it's justifiable to suggest that my family isn't doing enough to fight for what we believe in, if we actually want to make a difference for our philosophy and for our country. And I'll continue to fight those battles, but I'm going to continue to do so in a way that I think is true, because ultimately my faith informs everything I do, and a large part of my faith is pursuing truth and pursuing a logical thought process in order to get to truth. And what I believe is true right now is that, yes, we have some significant issues that we need to deal with respect to how our elections are conducted to ensure the integrity of our ballots. I absolutely believe that, and will continue to fight for that in the Virginia General Assembly. But I do think a significantly larger problem has to do with the overall philosophical battle that's going on in the country. Right? Yeah, it's significant when voter fraud can potentially change elections that are very, very close. That's significant. It should not be ignored. But I'm more concerned that the elections are so close when the political philosophies are so stark. The bottom line is that the popular culture is fighting for a version of America that doesn't believe that our primary goal should be to protect individual liberty and property rights and free markets. It believes in this idea of the government taking on this ever larger role and interfering in almost every single aspect of your life. But then the other larger part that we need to really get on board with is this idea of fighting back for the culture and making those arguments in a way that's relevant to a broad audience so that we're not just sitting in echo chambers. And that's part of what this podcast is about, right? This is not just me, I'm critiquing myself. It's about what can we do more of in order to be effective within the culture, not just within the political dynamic, but within media, within academia, within arts and entertainment. All of that's important. If it was in fact a coup attempt, it was probably the worst organized coup attempt in world history. I think some of that is a little bit hyperbolic. You saw a large group of people that were protesting over something that they cared about. You saw a smaller group of people then turn that protest and use it as an example or use it as an opportunity to riot, to engage in looting, to engage in destruction of private property. And in some cases, you saw people condemn it. In other cases, you saw people almost give tacit approval to it. Because once you've told people, once you've allowed certain types of behavior to go on unchecked, when you've allowed it to happen, or you've gone the extra step in some cases where you're theoretically condoning it, you can't be surprised when another group of people with a different set of policy objectives or a different set of ideas about injustice all of a sudden say, well, we're going to use the same tactics. And you really want to make people mad? Tell them there's a double standard. Tell them there's a standard that applies to them that doesn't apply to anybody else. Why? Because you disagree with them politically. Where you tell someone that your particular grievance justifies this sort of behavior, other people with grievances that you might not agree with, that you might not think are legitimate, they will come to the same conclusion. And he talked about bad people. He talked about fighting harder. He had gone even after Vice President Pence, who certified the Electoral College vote, which again, he was constitutionally obligated to do. I don't think the Vice President did anything wrong there. I think he was following the Constitution. The Vice President does not have unilateral authority to just negate what's going on with the Electoral College. They don't, and as a conservative, you wouldn't want them to. So let's be very clear about that. And that's one of the biggest things that we're running into right now. And I see this all the time where I'll even hear someone say, Nick, I'm not saying that their anger is necessarily justified, but it's genuine. Oh, okay, I understand it's genuine. I understand it's authentic. All right, the little child in the cereal aisle screaming at their mother because they won't buy them the sugary cereal they want, that child's anger is also authentic. It doesn't mean it's justified. And it doesn't mean that their behavior in that moment is justified simply because they're authentically angry. And it should be obvious, but it's not, and I'll explain why. The last principle is don't use force to get what you want. If it's no longer a general agreement that we have the capacity to fix our problems through voluntary cooperation, not government-sponsored coercion, well, then we shouldn't be surprised when people become very, very passionate about who's controlling the reins of government. We're really serious about greater civility within society, then it's about the standards applying equally to everybody. It's about watching our tone when we talk to people. It's about not assuming the worst in someone because you disagree on policy. And that final point, which I cannot emphasize enough, which I think is so critical, don't use force to get what you want, and don't outsource that force to a politician to do it for you. That doesn't magically make it okay or civil or nice simply because you had a majority vote to do with you what you want. But I want to talk about something else. What can we do that has nothing to do with politics, but is incredibly impactful on the culture?